The history of the Second Amendment. That's what we'll talk about today in the history video. First of all, here's its text. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's the Second Amendment to the Constitution. And there's, of course, a reason why it's the Second Amendment. The First Amendment protects our basic liberties: freedom of religion, of speech, of press, right of assembly, right to petition. And then the Second Amendment basically is sort of the enforcement mechanism of it. It says that citizens shall have the right to be armed, implicitly to protect their liberty. Back then, in colonial times, there was a real aversion to standing armies. So the only arms that would exist in the country would be those of loosely organized individual militias. These weren't state militias like we now have, where we have the National Guard units that are quasi-military or fully military. These were just citizens, Minutemen, who had access to guns and would periodically organize into groups, and particularly with the backbone of the American Revolution. There was a constant debate in the Revolution about whether to use militia units or the Continental Army. Ultimately, the Continental Army was necessary and much more effective, but yet the heritage of militia remained. And before Americans were willing to approve the Constitution, they wanted a guarantee that there would be a Bill of Rights and that would include the right to bear arms, so that they would have an alternative to obedience to the government. And you think about that in history. What if Jews were armed in Germany during World War II, during the Nazi Holocaust era? It would have been much, much harder for the Nazis to do what they did. Look at the Warsaw Ghetto, where with virtually no weapons, they held the whole German army at bay for 2 or 3 months. Look at the situation in the South during the Civil Rights era. Condi Rice writes that the reason that she supports the right to bear arms, supports the Second Amendment, and opposes gun control was that the Klan ruled her neighborhood in Birmingham when she was growing up, and her dad had to ride around with a shotgun on his lap to keep the night riders out of the neighborhood to protect his family, and that's why she understands the importance of the right to bear arms. Now, the Supreme Court is coming around gradually on this. The Miller case in 1934 was very ambiguous. It said, yeah, there is a right to bear arms, and it isn't only as part of a militia or a state National Guard, but it's not absolute, and it depends on the circumstances. Very, very vague. And under that decision, there were a bunch of gun controls passed. The Brady Bill, the waiting period, the ban on assault rifles, and so on. Now, the current courts have been much more pro-Second Amendment. In the Parker versus District of Columbia decision, they overturned a ban on handguns in D.C., possibly because of the crime rate and the affirmation of the Second Amendment. With all the massacres that have been going on, these horrible shootings in Colorado and in Wisconsin, we need to realize that while the absence of gun controls can legitimately be blamed for some of those people having these weapons, although they'd probably get them anyway, the massacre could have been prevented by guns. There was a massacre in Trolley Square in Seattle in 2007, where the guy opened fire, and one of the people who dived for cover was an off-duty police officer with his gun. And he held the gunman pinned down for about 20 minutes till the SWAT team could arrive and kill him. And as a result, there were 5 dead, but there could have been dozens of dead, just like there were in these other massacres. It's so interesting that the civil libertarians defend every other part of the Constitution. They're on criminal rights and search and seizure and self-incrimination and cruel and unusual punishment and prompt and speedy trial, as well as, of course, the rights of speech and press and so on. But they don't defend the Second Amendment right to bear arms. Well, it's in the Constitution. It says what it says. It means what it says. And it's about time we respected it. By the way, there's an effort going on now in the United Nations to curb guns called the Small Arms Treaty. It's the Arms Trade Treaty. And this would establish a UN method of gun control. We hollered about this a couple of weeks ago and did videos on this, and we had 700,000 emails sent to Congress against it. And partially as a result of that, 51 senators said they wouldn't ratify the treaty, and Hillary did not sign the treaty. But I think as soon as the election is over, Obama is going to sign that treaty, and I think the General Assembly will adopt it in September or October. So please sign the petition adjacent to this video so that we can keep you informed and help you mobilize as Minutemen, if you will, to fight for the Second Amendment. Thank you.